It's time for Recipe of the Day. You probably know that I am a bit obsessed with farro. I told you how to cook it on the stove last week, and that is one of my favorite ways to cook it. I have previously told you how to cook it in the Instant Pot as well. Farro is this wonderful ancient grain, possibly the grain that all others have derived from. That is what they say. It is kind of like barley. It looks a little bit like barley. It tastes a little bit like barley, but it doesn't get as mushy or soft like barley does when it's cooking for a long time. Or like, if you make a beef and barley soup and then you put the leftovers in the fridge and then the barley sucks up all the liquid and you kind of have this like gloppy stew left. Farro doesn't really do that. It tends to hold its texture and to not continue to absorb that liquid. So it's really great to add to soups. And so this is a beef and farro soup, kind of a riff on the classic beef and barley, right? Now, this recipe calls for cooked farro, so you need to cook the farro first. The recipe that I'm linking to actually does have instructions for how to cook it as well as part of making the soup, but it's much easier to do if you already have the farro, or you can cook it however you want. Like probably what I would do if I was making this soup and I didn't already have cooked farro is that I would cook some in the Instant Pot, enough for the soup and enough for like a side dish later in the week. And then I would use half of it from the Instant Pot in the soup and half of it in that side dish. That's what I would do. But if you are cooking it from scratch, you're going to cook a cup of farro in some boiling hot water that you've salted, and it's going to cook for about 20 to 30 minutes. It's simmering away until it's the softness that you want, and then you drain the water off of it. So once you have that farro cooked, you can then get started on the soup. So in a large pot or Dutch oven sized pot, you're heating some olive oil over medium heat, and then you're adding 3 carrots that you've peeled and chopped, 2 ribs of celery that have been chopped, and a medium onion chopped up. Those are going in there, and you're just cooking and stirring until they're soft. It's going to be like 4 to 5 minutes. Then you're adding in a pound of lean ground beef, half a teaspoon of salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. And you're going to kind of smoosh that down in with those veggies and let it cook for 4 to 5 minutes, stirring occasionally. I like to try and leave it for a good couple of minutes at a time so it can start trying to brown a little bit underneath. But sometimes with those veggies in there, it doesn't really brown like in a crispy way. It's just kind of cooking. You know what I mean? Either way is going to be fine in this soup. Once the beef is browned, you're going to add in 2 cups of cooked farro and 4 cups of beef stock, 1 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes. Give that a stir and increase the heat to high until it reaches a boil, and then reduce it down to a simmer and cook it for 10 minutes. Just really blending those flavors. Give it a taste and add more salt and pepper if you'd like. That, my friends, is it for that soup. What I will say is, you probably noticed there weren't a lot of seasonings going on in there. There were the aromatic vegetables, the carrot, celery, onion, and then some salt and pepper and the tomatoes. If you wanted to, you could take this soup in any direction, really, right? So when you are cooking the ground beef, when you add the salt and pepper to that beef, you could also add some other seasonings. You could do Italian with like some dried basil and oregano, or Italian seasoning. It would be 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning or 1 teaspoon each of the basil and oregano. You could add chili powder and smoked paprika. It would be 2 teaspoons of chili powder and half a teaspoon of smoked paprika. That would be delicious. Another thing that I have done for this soup is I've stirred in some barbecue sauce, about a half cup for the whole batch. It just adds this like depth and a little bit of tang that's really, really delicious. So really, you can take this soup in any direction that you want. You've got the basic bones of a beef and farro soup, very reminiscent of the beef and barley soup, and then you can add to it however you'd like. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there, or find it in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/recipeotd. And hey, just a quick note. I'm on a recording hiatus right now, so for the next little while, I'm replaying episodes from the archives, including this one. If you heard me mention a holiday, a season, or something going on in my life that seemed a bit off, that's why. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you're enjoying these older episodes. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, cookfor2.us, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.